I hand over this charge to Dr. V.S. Amre, who is coordinator of this webinar. Dr. Amre, sir.
नरसिंगे सर पुन्हा एकदा अनुभूत हा ओके ओके
Yes, ma'am. Yes. Dr. Shiva Ethel sir is working as a professor in the Department of Microbiology, uh, Department of Microbiology at Jnanopasik College, Parbhani. He is having 25 years of teaching experience at UG and PG in microbiology. He has completed one major and one minor research project. He has published 6 books related to the subject. He has published 20 research papers in international journals. And with this brief introduction, I would like to request Dr. Shiva Ethel, sir, to start his presentation, Science of Skill Building. Thank you, sir. We are eager to listen to your lecture. So, Dr. Shiva Ethel, sir, please start your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Narsinghe, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's my great pleasure to be here amongst the August gathering, the occasion of the Science Day. So, as a ritual, I would like to just ask, am I audible, sir?
yes sir
Yes, sir.
Thank you, madam. So, without wasting much time, I would like to jump into the job which has been assigned to me, and I would like to start my presentation. And I hope I have some around 45 to 50 minutes for my presentation. Is that right, sir?
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you, madam. So I'll be there time, and I'll be sharing my screen.
You are on mobile, sir?
Yes, madam.
Okay. Now it is very much clear.
The skill of clear thinking is the first slide. I would like to know if it is visible.
Yes, the skill of clear thinking.
Yes, thank you very much. So
Full screen.
Like,
Hello, sir. Please make it
madam.
full screen.
Is it full screen now, madam?
Yes.
Right. Thank you.
Right.
So, with the permission of the chair and on the occasion of this auspicious day, I would like to put forth some of my ideas on the science of clear thinking. Actually, when the organizers they contacted me, I just asked them what is the nature of the audience. They said that PG students, UG students, some staff, and my senior most members are there. So I thought of speaking on something which is related to science or social science. Social science, the word itself is such a beautiful word, but I don't know why we don't incorporate those aspects in our syllabus or curricula when we teach it to the students. Anyway, I have been a lifelong student of social behavior, social science, and I always find it fascinating to explore the human facets of brain and how this separates us from the other animals. So first, I would like to start from the very basic approach of how we are different from animals. What is the difference between humans and animals? So if you just see the screen, I have been observing it from many years that every year scientists they prove that some purely human traits are found in animals. This is very interesting. Just I would like to pause to say, am I audible and is the picture clear, madam?
Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you. Just to avoid the lag, I was asking the question. So I'll start. Thank you very much. So every year, scientists they have been proving that some purely human traits they are found in animals. Like let us say, sense of humor is found in chimpanzees. Complex communications is found in monkeys. Emotions are found in elephants. The cultural behavior is found in dolphins. Then self-awareness is found in some birds. Counting, chimpanzees can do that. Long-term memories, some birds are there, so on and so forth. But if you compare the capacity of humans with animals, we are nowhere. We are no match for them. If it comes to speed, we have a falcon which flies at 320 kilometers per hour. And the slowest is a fish which swims at 50 kilometers per hour. And when we walk in the morning walk, that is around 5 kilometers per hour, I suppose. Eyesight, there are some eagles which have 8 times sharper eyesight than us. Communication range of hearing is very great in some fishes. Lifespan, some tortoises, they live 200 years long, and so on. Long distance running, if you see cheetahs, deers, we are no match for them. But the point is, we need some skill sets to survive as humans. My question is, which set of skills do you need? I ask this question to my students always. I ask this question to myself. I ask this question to the August gathering here. Which set of skills do we really need to distinguish ourselves from animals, or let us say in this long journey of evolution, and to call us as an evolved person and not a primitive one? What do we need? After a lot of thinking, there are many skills, there are many components, memory, intelligence, etc., many. But according to me, I always think that the basic skill which is needed is of reasoning. Basic skill which is needed is of reasoning and thinking.
Sir, screen sharing stop झालंय sir.
Yes.
Yes, परत.
I hope it's on now. So this time, madam.
हो sir, दिसतंय.
So which set of skills do we need? This is a big question which I have been asking myself, my students, and everyone. The answer to this, we will gradually evolve into my thoughts, but I think that the skills which makes us humans is the decision making skill, the capacity to take decisions, and that to right decisions and apt decisions. That is the basic thing which we need as humans. Now, if you think, science has already proved with various experiments that our brain produces about 70,000 thoughts per day. 70,000 means even when you are sleeping, there are activities going out in the brain. But if you delete that part of sleeping, the active component of our life, we encounter with 70,000 thoughts per day. Out of this, interestingly, if you see 60,000 thoughts are what we can say is processed, means not lost. Out of that, 57,000 are habitual thoughts, means should I get up, should I brush, should I have a lunch or a dinner or what? These are decisions and thoughts are the basis for decisions. And out of this, for students and most of the normal human beings, 45,000 of these thoughts are negative in nature. Means what if I have to do this, what if I have to do that, so on and so forth. So we have a lot of negative thoughts in our brain. Turning these 45,000 negative thoughts, what if, into what if for the normal life to go on, we have to take a decision. We have to make decisions. What happens is, you can only choose your thoughts, but your perception of it and therefore your experience of it is what it matters. You choose your thoughts, then a person becomes a good or bad, or the day becomes a good or bad, or your work is successful or not. It is all based upon the choice of your thoughts and your perception of it. You see, your choice may not be right or wrong, but your perception and your experience really matters. It's all in the brain. It's all in the brain. And we, as it's a science day, I would like to tell you that right from your childhood till your death, you have certain chemicals in the brain which makes things function. When your brain releases these chemicals, you feel good, you feel bad, you feel sad. Some of the good chemicals. They are dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, endorphin. These are the good chemicals which make you good, feel good. When you go for a walk, on the top you can see two brain scan pictures. Left one is a normal brain. There is no serotonin in it, let us say. And then these can be attributed to two examples. One is normal, then the other is when you go for a walk, your brain is filled with dopamine. In the another scanned picture, this is a compilation of 20 different activities into one. Therefore, irrespective of the slide, just focus on what I'm saying, that normal brain can look like what's it in the left side, and on the right side it's a brain which is full of dopamine if you go for a 1 hour walk. Or let us say it is a depressed brain which has nothing, and it is a happy brain which is full of happy chemicals. Now if you just see the chemical structure between a dopamine and a cocaine, the third picture at the bottom, you'll find a lot of similarities between these drugs. One is a neurochemical, other is a neuroinducer, let us say cocaine. Why people get a high, you will understand here. It is the same thing if you go for a 1 hour walk, or if you have some few dose of cocaine, or if you are having a good humor with your good friend and you are laughing very wholeheartedly, then you will have this happiness. It's all in the brain. Similarly, you will have some sad chemicals also, that is cortisol. When cortisol is secreted, you will become sad. My point today is to explain or to elaborate my thoughts on what skill is needed. I emphasize on the skill of clear thinking. We have to have our thoughts very clear. Now, what makes these thoughts very clear? As I said, chemicals are there, but what induces the chemicals? Your thoughts. Now, we all live in a spotlight syndrome. We like to tell stories. This usually happens as we go on becoming senior. The more senior I become, the more stories I have to tell to the younger generation. And I get stuck in a loop, and I keep on telling, हमारे ज़माने में ऐसा नहीं था, हमारे ज़माने में ऐसा था. This generation doesn't want your cock and bull stories. Try to understand that. Why? Because they are the new generation with new set of stories. And the spotlight syndrome is always there. It is a monkey mirroring effect, which I call it as. If I have the spotlight syndrome, my next generation is going to have the spotlight syndrome. We are so aware about our look, our dress, maybe what bike I have, what four-wheeler I have, what type of a bungalow I have. Always thinking that the spotlight is on me and the whole world is watching. Let me tell you, if you are wearing a white shirt and there is a small black spot on your pocket, and you pass through a people of 10,000, let us say mob of 10,000 people, you pass through it. I would like to ask you, how many of them may have watched your black spot on the pocket and told you that this doesn't look good on you, sir? To be very frank, none. Maybe one who is your friend. He just watched, and it doesn't matter because he's your friend. Nobody watches. But we like to live in a spotlight syndrome. We are addicted to certain things. We are addicted to many things. I would not like to go on elaborating here because the example varies with the audience. If it's students, I say you are addicted to WhatsApp and mobile. If it's adults, they are addicted to something else. Addiction is in the brain, and it is the dopamine effect, which I call it as. So the point here is, we all like to live or are living in a life of bias and fallacies. We tell something, the student thinks something, or the listener, I would like to say here. I hope there are students also. They should also have a perspective of my thoughts. We say something, the listener listens some things, he perceives some things, makes it out something. This is what is going on. And then we all come to a point that whatever I am saying is the truth. It is a bias, life of biasness and fallacies we are all living in. We are moving away far from the truth or the fact. Like, for example, this is my favorite line, my very favorite line, which I just jokingly tell people ask me, if they ask me, आप कहाँ रहते हो, तो मैं कहता हूँ मैं अपनी औकात में रहता हूँ. That is where we have to be. The spot is there. क्या हम अपनी औकात में रहते हैं? औकात क्या है? That is the truth, the truthfulness. You see the second figure, a cowboy has pulled some 4 to 5 gunshots on the board, and later on he is creating the circles so as to make an impression that his shots were bullseye. He had put the shots on bullseye. That is how we all are living. What is the reason for that? For that, I would like to, in next coming slides, give you 10 biases and 10 fallacies. 10 biases and 10 fallacies, which will go on to prove that if we know this, as I always say to my students, if you know the question, you know half of the answer. I'd never demand an answer. I say, listen to my question and understand the question at least. Don't worry about the answer. Because if you know the question, half of the answer is ready in your mind. Understand the question. So if we understand the biases and fallacies we are living in, believe me, meet me sometime in person. I will tell you hundreds of fallacies and biases which we are living in. But today, as the time is the constant, I will tell you 10 of them. I would like to put forth, present 10 biases and 10 fallacies which we are living in, which is making our life something which it should not be. Our life, a life of falseness, not the truthfulness, and we are living just like that. So the first of all is to understand the biases and policies. First biasness is, if you understand, as I said, then we will have a clarity in our mind of our life. So the first bias, which I think is the most dangerous of all, and we are living in this, is the confirmation bias. Today, with the media people, the political ideologies, the religious ideologies, creeping into students, teachers, faculties, everywhere. I see this is a dawn of new political and ideological world. I am saying, not only India. Left and right, we are having so many thoughts and so many ideas, and everybody at the top of their lungs is shouting how they and they only are right. And we all are born with a confirmation bias. When I have a religious ideology, when I have a cultural ideology, I am biased, basically. Confirmation bias is the tendency to search for, interpret, recall information in a way that supports what we already believe. I am a microbiologist. I will always say microbiology is the top subject in the world. I will go to an extent of such a crime, I call it as a crime, that we see arts and commerce people as some low people, which is a crime, I suppose. Art of living came first. Commerce of trading things came second. And man was lazy, sat under the tree. After having his tummy full, apple fell on his head, and then science came into existence. So science is last, I think, needed for survival. That is our pride, that is our ego. The ego of a full tummy is science, I suppose. But still we are having so huge confirmation bias that we really don't want the truth. We just want constant reassurance that what we believe is the truth. This is confirmation bias. So if we can choose a middle path, either left nor right, the middle path of life. Just like the best example in today's times, I think no need to say, is Narendra Modi and Rahul Gandhi. There are followers. What I suppose is everybody has the right to vote to whom he wants to vote. Then why the debate? And why the whole hue and cry about who is right and who is wrong and blah, blah, blah? Can we not just focus on what is the truth? We can. For that, you have to kill what you love. To overcome the confirmation bias, you have to just, it's called as, in a classic phrase, it's called as murder your darlings. You have to murder your darling. Whatever is so dear to you, murder it. Facts and evidences are on one side and your beliefs on other side, and you live in the middle. That is the evidence which we believe is the confirmation bias. Just like the two guys here, they are arguing what is 6 and what is 9. Both are right, maybe. Just because one of them is right doesn't mean the other is wrong, because he has not seen the life from the other side. So if you can see, jump on to other, they cross the paths, exchange their seats, then you will have a clear idea. Then you will have a dual idea of what is the perspective which you are having. Can we do that? As a microbiologist, can I see a botanist, a chemist? Can I see arts, commerce, art, microbiology in arts, microbiology in commerce, microbiology in chemistry, microbiology in zoology, microbiology in botany, microbiology everywhere? Antonio Leonov was a Dutch merchant, cloth merchant, and he saw microbiology in cloths. See, they didn't have confirmation bias. So first is confirmation bias. My second is sunken cost fallacy. This is a fallacy which we all live in. Sunken cost fallacy is पैसा वसूल tendency. पैसा वसूल करने के लिए जीना. Just think you go to a cinema hall and you sit there, you are watching a movie, you have purchased 200 rupees ticket, and within 10 minutes you think that the movie is bakwas, bundle movie. You can't tolerate it furthermore, but you still sit there 3 hours and watch it. Why? Because you have spent 200 rupees, and you think that after watching it for 3 hours, your paisa will be vasool. That is the sunk cost fallacy, or the sunken cost fallacy. It refers to the previously invested resource that which actually cannot be recovered, but you try to recover by taking a decision which is very wrong. You take a decision that I will sit here for 3 hours. If you are a businessman, go to your shop and do business for 3 hours, you will earn more than 200 rupees. But we never think like that. Students always have this. They always try to find out the best cost of something and lose a lot. Time is one of them. They lose a lot of time there in investing in wrong ways and wrong ideas. We also adults do the same. So sunk cost fallacy is one of the bias which we fall for. And there are various reasons why we fall for this sunk cost fallacy. Because we have a false sense of hope. We have a hope that things will improve. We believe that quitting is losing. We will not quit. 10 मिनट में थिएटर के बाहर तो मैं जिंदगी भर कभी गया नहीं कि कैसा जाऊं. That is a belief. Then we have a notion that admitting mistake will hurt my reputation. This is one of the big things. Then we have a past success, and this avoids for future investments. Past success is there, and that avoids your future investment into taking quick decisions. How to overcome the sunk cost fallacy? Quit fast, quit often, quit without guilt, and move on. This is the basic mantra for overcoming the sunk cost fallacy. हर किसी में पैसा वसूल करने की जो tendency है, that actually results into a lot of loss. We never know that. The third bias is authority bias. We all are affected by this. Our tendency to alter our opinions or behavior to fit those who we consider to be a senior or an authority on a given subject. Means if somebody, I'm a microbiologist, and if some botanist comes and tells me something about microbiology, I have a sense of feeling that he is not the right man. I am the authority on that. How can he speak? What does he know? And forget if some arts man, a man from arts comes and talks authoritatively on microbiology because he has studied more out of his sheer interest. I will not take that. Oh, arts wala mujhe microbiology sikhayega. Think about it. It's authority bias which we all are living. मुझे सिखाए, कल का बच्चा मुझे सिखाएगा. कल का बच्चा आप देखो आपसे ज्यादा technologically advanced है, सीखो आप. No, but we have authority bias which we are living in, and it's all in the brain. Authority bias is the tendency to follow or believe the instructions and view of a person of authority. Examples of authority bias: see, expert advice on stock market. Stock market, most of the people they give advices. Yeah, मुझे पता है, मैंने बहुत market देखा है, आप invest करो. Nothing, it is a random process. Second is the Avantia 52 flight crash. This is a real incidents which took place between a flight from Colombia to US, where the pilot was instructed to land at some airport, which was far away. He said, yes, sir. He had a syndrome of pleasing people. That pilot has a syndrome of pleasing people. He could never say no. How many of we have this? Think about it. We can never say no to our seniors. What is wrong in, if the senior is wrong, we should have the capacity to tell him in a right way, not in an arrogant tone, but in a right way. Sir, no, I cannot do this. This is not right for me at the present time. But that pilot was a person pleaser, and he never said no. He knew that there was no enough fuel in the flight, but still he said yes. He tried to fly over to that spot where he was instructed to go, and he killed 75 people in the process. This is called as the Avantia flight crash incident for the authority bias. Then listening to the advice of the successful people. Some successful person comes and starts giving advice from the dais. I always say that don't listen to the successful people, because they never say what failure is. Listen to a person who has failed. You'll get reasons for failure. Successful person speaking is a fantasy, is a mirage. He just glorifies the things. Talk to a person, or a successful person talk about his failures. Then you can listen. Commercials with celebrities, advertisements. Some heroine comes and talks about being fair and lovely, applying some damn chemical cream. Or some sportsman comes and says this cold drink is very good for your health. This is authority based, and we listen. No need. You have experience, you have basis of science. Think about your brain. Social media influencer. To overcome, you have to think logically. Assume the same recommendation may come from a lower authority. Question the person who is giving you the authority. These affect, when you get affected by authority bias, you become a people pleaser. You have trouble disagreeing, you apologize often, you have too many things on your work table which you should not be doing. You feel uncomfortable when someone disagrees with you. You try to avoid conflict. You fear negative emotions of others. नहीं उसको गुस्सा आ जाएगा. You sugarcoat the things. Flattery is a product of authority bias. You want people to like you. Spotlight syndrome. You worry more about what people think about you and what you think about the people, and you are not able to say no. You always say okay, okay, sure, I'll do that. This is authority bias. The fourth, which is there, is illusion of control. I'm going to give you 10. Within time I will conclude. So illusion of control, as the name suggests, illusion of control bias describes an individual's tendency to assume more control than actually is available, often in very irrational situations. Illusion of control is the thing that मराठीमध्ये आपण म्हणतो ते कुत्रा जे बैल गाडीच्या खाली चालत राहतो, तो एका वेळेनंतर त्याला वाटते की हे बैलगाडी मीच चालवतोय काय, कारण तो थांबला की बैलगाडी थांबत असते आणि तो चालला की बैलगाडी चालत असते. This is illusion of control. Or even in some texts they say that lizard which is there on the wall upside down, it thinks that it is holding the whole slab on its own hands. It is illusion of control. We live just like this. We live in a life with illusion of control. And as an example, I would like to give you an experiment which was done in America, and it had a room in which the sound acoustic, it is the acoustic sensitivity to pain experiment. What they did was, in a room they had some students, and they increased the decibel level of the sound so that it caused pain to the ears, and they were told to record the level of decibel which was tolerable. Means at after a particular point of time, if they couldn't tolerate the pain, they were told to stop, and the decibel levels were measured. Interestingly, in another set of experiment in room B, one thing was done. Room B had a red panic button on the wall. The panic button was purely for show. It was not functioning, but it gave participants the feeling that they were in control of the situation. They were told that if you are in pain, press this red panic button. Don't worry, we will take care of it. So they had assurance that if something happens, I can press this button and nothing will happen. So it was found that people in room B tolerated more pain as compared to room A, because it led them to withstand significantly more noise because they thought they had control of pain over them. We all have this illusion of control over us. We think that I am controlling the situation. You think when you go for a leave of 10 to 15 days, you keep on thinking that मैं नहीं है तो वहाँ क्या हो रहा होगा, मैं नहीं हूँ तो काम तो होगा ही नहीं, मेरी वहाँ कितनी जरूरत है. Nobody is indispensable, remember that. Nobody is indispensable. Great leaders have perished. The world still goes on. Not a single system is indispensable. Everything can function without you. But we live in an illusion where we think that I have control over the situation. If we understand this, if we understand that my presence is not the only thing, but it is a collective effort, it is a team effort. The lowest of the rank person working in my organization is as equally as important as I am the head of this institution or the whole owner of this institution. There is a separate philosophy called as the servant philosophy. The bosses have to work as if they are servants, servant ideology, something different perspective, but that will remove the illusion of control issue in your mind. The fifth one is outcome bias. Now this is very interesting for students and teachers alike. What happens is that if a student comes in merit, the teacher says that my student is there in merit. I worked hard. I taught so nicely that my students came in merit. How many of us flaunt our students' merits and medals on the Facebook and WhatsApp saying that this is my student and he got the medal, and somewhere on the back of your mind, you think that that is due to me. Outcome bias. Now go to the student, ask him secretly or try to read his mind. He said, he thinks, ये मेडल तो मुझे मेरे मेहनत की वजह से मिला है, किसी ने कुछ नहीं किया है, किसी ने पढ़ाया नहीं है, कुछ नहीं है. Nobody taught me. It is all 100% my efforts. They are just taking the credit unnecessarily. Both of them think like that. There is something truth in between. Can you realize what that truth is? You have to see, it may be the born intelligentsia of the student, or really it may be you who worked it out, or really it was the student who worked it hard. I always say that pushing a 70% student to 90% is a very easy job, but bringing a 30% student to 40% is the toughest job for a teacher. Think about it. Bringing a 20%, a student who is 20% to 40% is a real job of a teacher. Pushing somebody who is already capable of achieving 70 to 9, pushing him to 90, 95 is no big deal. That happens automatically. Just you need a little push. But here, a big pull is needed. Taking successful outcomes as evidence for a good decision, or unsuccessful outcomes as evidence for a bad decision, without regarding the prior state of knowledge, is outcome bias. For surgery, let us say if there is a very difficult surgery where the surgeon is about to fail, the surgeon and the operation succeeds, very proudly the doctor says, कुछ नहीं था, वो मेरे बाएं हाथ का. But if there is very 10% chance of failure, and if the surgeon fails, then the people will have a lawsuit against him. The doctor will keep on thinking how this happened. This is the outcome bias. Can we come out of the outcome bias? We judge a decision based on the outcome. This is the basis of outcome bias, rather than how exactly the decision was made. For example, if you win a big lottery somewhere in a casino or a gambling den in Goa, let us say, that doesn't mean that your gambling was a very smart decision because you won crores in that. That is outcome bias. Sixth is planning fallacy. Planning fallacy is the tendency to underestimate how long it will take to complete a task. We always fail. Syllabus remaining half, students unable to cover the syllabus for their exams. We always fall short of our planning, and man keeps on planning. The planning always fails. Why this happens? It is called as the planning fallacy. It is a tendency to underestimate how long it will take to complete a task. We never know. We always it happens that you plan something and it takes too long. For example, if you give students 2 dates of submission, just think which will they choose. You give them one date of tomorrow's and one date after 1 week for submission of their project, practicals, whatever that. Think about it, which will they choose? 99% of the students, they will say, yes sir, next week we will submit next week. Why? Because they know that they don't have a plan. They don't have a plan. Their plan fails. Why? Because mostly the plan in the mind is a straight line, but in reality it's a lot of ups and downs affected by various parameters, and it will take long time to reach your goal or aim. Same thing happens with classic example with research students here. You see, your research is supposed to be completed within 3 years. I think 100% of the students, not a single student has completed his PhD in 3 years. Why that thing happens? Why the planning fails? It is the planning fallacy. We never plan properly, and we always believe that my plan is perfect, but we never consider the parameters which will affect your plan. So we have to come out of that planning fallacy. Planning fallacy always. The 7th is endowment effect. Endowment effect. Now these are some of the biases and fallacies which we live in, whole life we live in, and we don't have a clarity of the life. If you can understand this and overcome this, I think we will have a clear vision of how to live life, and all this thing is in the brain. Endowment effect is believing that whatever I have is the best, and what the person in the front he has is the worst. It is not good. What I do is best. What the person does in front of me is not better than me, at least. Colleagues, think about it. How many of you really appreciate your colleagues' lectures, works, research from the heart without saying it to anyone? Don't even tell it to me here that, yes, I appreciate my colleague's work, my colleague's lecture. No, we have that endowment effect. We are unwilling to trade our things with our counterparts or our. This is the basis for patriarchy and what you can say, the feminism movements which are taking place, isn't it? Patriarchal systems, they have always dominated. We never ever feel that whatever it may be from the bottom of the heart thing, males, especially this question, honorable ladies are also present here. They will agree with me that males will never think that women are better. That is the endowment effect. As a society as whole, we have to overcome this. We have to give equal opportunity of respect and beliefs to everyone around us. It's just like people who value an object they possess much more than they don't have. This happens. So endowment effect is one thing which if we understand, then we can overcome it. 8th is the contrast effect. I would like to tell a small story here, small short story. It is a real story of 2 brothers, Sid and Harry. They ran a clothing store in America in 1930s. Sid was in charge of sales and Harry led the tailoring department. Means one brother sold the cloths and the other stitched the cloths. Whenever Sid noticed that the customer who stood before the mirror really liked the suit, what he did, थोड़ा acting करता था. He became a little hard of hearing. ऐसे सुने नहीं आ रहा है ऐसा करता था. And he would call his brother, Harry, how much this suit costs? Harry would look up to from his cutting table, tailoring table, and shout back, oh, for that beautiful cotton suit, I think that is $42. Actually, believe me, that suit was $15. That suit was around $15 to $18. But exaggerated price, Harry would shoot up. Oh, for that beautiful suit, it is $42. And Sid would pretend, जैसे कि उसने सुना नहीं, and he used to say, how much? Harry would yell again, $42. Sid would again turn to the customer and say, I think my brother says $22. Now see, suddenly the customer has heard the conversation. Customer had heard that Harry was saying 42, Sid is saying 22. Suddenly he picks up he says, yes, I am purchasing it, give it. He pays $22 and runs away. They are still plus $8. This is the contrast effect. Contrast effect is we are ruined by the advertisements, by the contrast effect. Contrast effect is something like this. Both the blue dots are of same size. This is an illusion, you know very well. Most of you may have seen it. Why I have brought it here is again because in the contrast effect, we notice the difference between the things, but we do not absorb the absolute measures. We do not absolutely measure whether that is really big and small or not. Advertisements, they do large screen effect, big screen. Why do people worship the screen actors, screen goddesses, they say? Because they're larger than life. The screen people, all the nonsense people out there acting. We forget that they're acting. Okay. And we give such a huge importance to all the screen divas, actors and actresses, that they become larger than our own life. It is called as the contrast. We notice the difference between things, but not the absolute measures. As an example, if you put one hand in cold water, one hand in hot water, leave them for a while, then take it out and put both into lukewarm water. That is a mixture of this lukewarm water. You'll be surprised to know that the left still feels hot while the right still feels cold, or there's an exchange of that phenomenon. This is what we are always living with. This is a cognitive bias which happens. So we have to overcome that. The ninth is overthinking effect. Usually for students and most of the people in today's times of technology, smartphones becoming smart and smarter, we are becoming more and more idiotic in nature. The phones are becoming smart. Brain is opening too many tabs, I can say. Our brain keeps open too many tabs which don't close down even when you sleep. Meditation is a long story. Nobody can meditate in today's time because we are suffering from overthinking. We shift from thinking to too much to learning from too much. This is the one which happens with us. Just I would like to pause to ask, am I audible and is the session on, sir, properly? Is it functioning properly? I'd like to ask Madam, is the session going on properly? Am I audible, sir?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you. Just thought I should not get lost in time. So I just counter check. Thank you, madam. Thank you for your feedback. I will be closing in a few minutes. So the ninth effect is overthinking effect, which I was trying to explain. In today's times, we have so many tabs of our brain open and we suffer from overthinking. That, as I said, meditation is a long thing to achieve, but still, can we overcome this overthinking effect and save ourselves and our brains to function for what it needs to function? We are constantly obsessed about the problems instead of finding the solutions in today's times. We are not able to shift our mental frame from loss to gain, from negative to positive. We always go on becoming negative and negative. We feel a decision fatigue when we are not making so many decisions. If you are given opportunity to make decisions, you have a decision fatigue and you are not really making too many decisions. Why this is happening? We are stuck in analysis paralysis and we are not able to find a perfect solution. I call it as analysis paralysis. We analyze so much that we don't conclude anything. ज्यादा सोच हमारे फैसलों को कमजोर कर रही है. We tend to solve problems in our head instead of in real life action. We try to solve it in the head itself. And this is the overthinking effect. And overthinking today is the biggest cause of unhappiness. Can we overcome the overthinking problem? That last is the Schaufer knowledge, which I would like to put forth in front of you. There are two types of knowledge, the street knowledge and the Planck knowledge. The street smartness. You see, this is very important for us to understand and pass on to the next generation when we keep telling stories of our past. When we start telling stories of our past, we tend to overblow the things. We don't put it as it is. We glorify ourselves. We have all the syndromes and the fallacies in front of us. And whenever we start a story, we put ourselves as the hero of that story, which is not always the truth. This is called as Schaufer knowledge. Schaufer knowledge. Schaufer is the driver. Let us say low class. Let us say maybe. Why street smartness? Street smartness is totally different from intellectual smartness. Intellectualness is different than street smartness. Just folding up your sleeves for any situation is street smart. आने दो देखता हूं मैं. Street smart. आने दो सोचेंगे क्या करना है. That is need some knowledge. I'd like to tell a small story of Nobel Prize winner Max Planck, who in 1918, after winning the Nobel Prize, went on tour across Germany and for lectures on quantum mechanics. All of you must be knowing this, but for those who don't know, see, this is a very interesting story. He gave lectures on quantum mechanics because he got a Nobel Prize for that. Over the time, his chauffeur, his driver, he was there for a long time and he learned the whole lecture by heart. Max Planck's whole lecture was learned by heart by the Planck's driver, chauffeur. So one day he gets very bored because he doesn't understand anything. For every lecture, he has to listen to the same Planck theory. So he says, Professor Planck, how about that I give this lecture one day and you can sit in the front row and become my driver? I have learned that much from you and that will give some change. Planck likes the idea. So that evening in Munich, the driver goes on the dais, gives a long lecture on quantum mechanics in front of distinguished audience. Later on, there is a deliberation and a noted physics professor stands up with a question which the driver cannot give. There is a question asked. Now the driver is trying to act as Planck, but he doesn't know. But his wisdom, what he does, the driver says, oh, this is a very simple question. Why don't you ask my driver, my chauffeur? He will answer it. My chauffeur will answer the question. My driver will answer the question. This is called a chauffeur knowledge. Are you that driver who really is a scientist, or are you a scientist who is acting like a driver, or are you a driver who is acting as a scientist? This is the thing which you should know. So there are two types of knowledge. Chauffeur knowledge. There is surface knowledge which comes, people pretend, just googling something and telling something. Ask students anything, they know everything because that is chauffeur knowledge. They will extract it from Google. Their mind doesn't have it seeded in there. We all do that. Go to a doctor prescribe something, we Google it and know more than the doctor. And when then we start advocating the doctor, it is very dangerous. So you have to come out of it. You have to come out of this chauffeur knowledge. People with real knowledge and people with chauffeur knowledge, there is a difference. People with real knowledge, they make effort to understand the topic, communicate the knowledge. They say, I don't know when they don't know. They recognize their limits and they know when they don't know, they ask. This is important. Whereas people with chauffeur knowledge, they will never ask. They have no time or interest to understand the topic. They never say, I don't know. They will say, I know everything. They say everything is known and they read it from a script, maybe from Google, maybe from Wikipedia. They have a showmanship and they try to dominate their presence. Finally, lastly, I would like to give an example of Michelangelo's most famous sculpture, David. 3 photographs which you are seeing. The third I have shown because to give you the magnitude of its height. It is a huge statue, beautifully carved. One of the artistic creativities of Michelangelo. You see, if you see the hand, even the vein and veinlets he has carved from the stone. The expressions are beautiful. Hair, hairlocks. It's a full naked body of David. It's a masterpiece of masterpieces. It is believed that it is a masterpiece of masterpieces in the field of arts. The Roman Pope once asked Michelangelo, "Tell me your secret of your genius. How can you create the statue of David, which is a masterpiece of all masterpieces?" Michelangelo's answer was very simple. Simply said, "I removed everything that is not David. I just removed the unwanted parts from the sculpture." Can we do that? Can we remove the biases and fallacies from our life and have a notion of clear thinking? So my question, which set of skills do we really need? I believe that we need a skill set of clear thinking and a good decision making, which comes from education. Education and scientific education is one of the most powerful tools in today's times, which gives the power to think clearly, which gives the power to act well in the world's work, and which gives the power to appreciate life. I hope we all strive or urge to live a life like this. Thank you very much. I thank all the organizers for giving me opportunity to speak on this auspicious day. Amde sir, Joshi sir, madam, organizers, everybody. Thank you one and all.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, Dr. Shiva sir, for your excellent and informative lecture. Thank you once again. Now, I am moving toward the next lecture. I am here to introduce second speaker of today's webinar. We are having renowned guest speaker, Dr. Sushma Chapalkar Madam. She is principal of Sharat Chandra Pawar College, Jejuri. She has completed her PhD degree from Agarkar Research Institute, Pune. Now she is PhD guide of Savitribai Phule, Pune University, Pune, and Dr. Babasaheb Ambedkar, Marathwada University, Aurangabad. Her research contribution is vast. She has 89 research papers of international repute on her credit. She successfully completed research projects and obtained funds from different central government funding agencies. She is founder member of Vidya Pratishthan School of Biotechnology, Baramati. She established VSBT in very nice manner. She worked as NAC assessor. She is principal coordinator of DBT Star College project. She honored with various awards and prizes. One of them is she was felicitated with renowned Punjab Rao Deshmukh Outstanding Woman Scientist Award. Today, she is going to deliver a lecture on phycobiome, the brain and gut connection. With this brief introduction, I request Dr. Sushma Chapalkar Madam to start her presentation. Chapalkar Madam, please share your screen.
Thank you so
Unmute.
much. Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Hamde. At the outset, let me thank the organizers for giving me this wonderful opportunity to be with all of you, all students of Yogeshwari Mahavidyalaya, all staff and the management people on this very occasion of Science Day. Am I allowed to share the screen, sir?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Madam, am I allowed?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay, just a moment. Just a moment. Do you see the screen?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it clearly seen?
Make it full screen. Make it
Yeah.
slideshow.
Yeah. Going there. Why is it not going?
Mm,
Just a moment. Yeah, is it seen?
yeah.
Yeah.
It's working.
Yeah. Good morning, everybody. Let me thank Principal R.D. Joshi, IQAC Coordinator Dr. Hamde, your Vice Principal Dr. Kulkarni, the management people, the President Dr. Kursare, for giving me this opportunity to be with you uh, today on a topic which says that there is something called a psychobiome, and which speaks about the brain and gut connection that we all human beings have, and perhaps the animals also have. We're not very well aware. It's a wonderful coincidence that my earlier speaker spoke about brain and the thinking of brain and clear thinking, and how does one achieve it. And then something that I might want to introduce to the audience today is how can we keep it tight and right, okay, through our gut. So the next slide, which is a title slide, which also says the same. And here we begin. What is the outline of the talk that I would like to introduce to you? It is about understanding the gut microflora. Because I'm a microbiologist by profession and training, I would choose more microbiology, but then I sincerely believe that science should not be compartmentalized into these subjects. It was a necessity long back that we had to specialize and go vertically and to understand that particular subject better. For example, zoology, botany, mathematics, physics. But we cannot understand the machine of human body without knowing the wholeness of the science behind it. Now we have to know what is the gut and brain axis. We've never thought of ourselves as machines, and therefore this axis term comes little mechanically to us, and we do not imagine such axis within our bodies. The psychobiome explained, the microbiome based drug for mental health. I'm sure mental health is a big thing now, because earlier we used to see physical health would make us live longer. But then if the mental health weakens us inwardly with all the fallacies and biases that Dr. Shiva just now discussed with all of us, then we are not really doing good mentally. And if you're not doing good mentally, then even a gym master can have problems. So, and the last one, which I will bring home for the students who feel that the introduction to this topic is a future to their career. So they might want to know, how does one go about it as a career or as a startup or as something for their PhD program or something which might take them to the research avenues. Now here we start. I'm sure, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Now here we go with little more depth in the scientific acumen that I would like all of you to know. Your standard first to your standard 12th literature has been brought out on this slide, which says that bacterial ecology in the GI tract, that is gastrointestinal tract. You know this since long. The mucosal surface of GI tract, GI is gastrointestinal tract, is colonized by 1 trillion cells actually. And they say that the surface area, in the textbooks it is written that the surface area for GI tract is around 200 to 300 square meters. But now they have eventually found out that it is somewhere around 40 square meters. Now this kind of an understanding of GI tract also brings us to the ignorances that we earlier had in the scientific community. I will not date it to the ancient Indian community, because that would put us into a little of bias. But then as we proceed in this particular discussion, you will understand that how right we eat as Indians. Second is the biomass, microbial biomass within us is approximately 2 kgs. So if I am weighing 60 kgs, 2 kgs are contributed by the microbial biomass. And it is also said in 2000 we had the whole human genome done by Celera. And they say these genes are also contributive by the microbial biomass that is there on the body. We are discussing 2 kgs within our GI tract. We have skin, we have other organs which also harbor equal number of bacteria, which can contribute to the total human genome that we normally discuss is entirely ours. There is a fallacy there. 400 different species. When we learn FY, SY, TY, Part 1, Part 2 MSc program in any university in India, we learn around 100 number of times the enteric bacteria, but they do not speak about 400 different species. It's high time that we realize the shortcoming of the syllabus. And dear students, on this science day, I allow you to collaborate with your own body and find out which are these 400 around different species residing within you. मायक्रोबायोलॉजी शिकून काय उपयोग झाला असं कधीही मग वाटणार नाही तुम्हाला. हे नक्की मी सांगू शकते, कारण यू आर युझिंग दॅट पर्टिक्युलर अंडरस्टँडिंग टू मेक युअर मायक्रोबायोटा अँड युअर लाईफ बेटर. Now this term is little different than the terms you learn about enteric bacteria. This is autochthonous, that is indigenous flora. We have to learn these terms because we learn science in foreign language. Had these been स्थावर फ्लोरा आपल्याला लगेच कळलं असतं, पण ऑटोक्थोनस flora is indigenous, which has given the privilege and adaptation to colonize particular habitat, which is physical space in the GI tract. You have a small diagram here, and physical space in GI tracts are shown clearly here, and the GI tract is also given. What does it say? It has a pH gradient. Everybody here knows how digestion proceeds. Once we eat, what happens to the food till we excrete the rest of it? Stomach is pH 1.5 to 5. Duodenum is 5 to 7. Jejunum is 7 to 9. Ileum is 7 to 8. And the rest of the colon is around 5 to 7. So what is the total microbial biomass that goes in this pH? It is highest somewhere in the jejunum, which is 10 raised to 4 to 5, and ileum, which is 10 raised to 8. So the bacterium has to survive a pH gradient, which is very difficult for any other life form to help. So here when we say colonize, these are the bacteria which have undergone this flux, which has undergone this gradient every day in and day out, and they have been successfully colonized in the mucosal surface of the GI tract, somewhere in the physical space. Okay, and what is autochthonous? It is transient flora. Transient flora meaning transient is sometimes it is on, sometimes it is not. So they cannot colonize particular habitat except under abnormal conditions. And this is the main topic that I would like to touch upon. Colonization of transient flora is also an indication of an abnormal condition. So what is abnormal condition? It is bad health of the physical facility that God has given us, which was described so very differently by the earlier speaker. And it is also connecting my mental and psychological health. This is the point that I want to bring home to my students today, who would be immensely benefited if they start practicing the right way. What are the factors which affect the gut microflora? Those which are autochthonous and those which are transient. pH, of course. Nutrition and exercise, of course. Age, yes, definitely. Wear and tear of the machine. Stress, unnecessary wear and tear. Addictions, which I am not going to discuss today, but it would mean so much to those who are already in it. Interactions with other bacteria. It could be anything from antagonism to symbiosis. And adhesion, very importantly, adhesion. So when I say I have some indigenous flora, then it means that it has bypassed, it has overcome the entire aspects that I have mentioned, and then they have colonized successfully. How do they colonize? Let us discuss that succession. We are born. We are in the amniotic fluid and we have a flora, they say. Earlier there was a misnomer that it was a sterile thing, and only Bifidobacterium bifidus would be brought in, and so give honey, and that would make the right colony available in the child's or infant's or a newborn's intestine. Very true in one way, but now they say that even amniotic fluid could have some or the other influence on the GI tract. Newborn location, you can have a normal delivery and you can have a C-section. You can have formula milk or mother's milk. Now, these also would definitely matter so much because the first nutrition and the mode of birth also dictate Enterobacteriaceae and bifidum in their titer in that particular thing. If it's a normal delivery, Lactobacillus, Prevotella, and some other genus. Just as I told you, there are very new genera even to me, and I would like to really start listening and learning about it. In C-sections, you have Staph, Corynea, and Propionii. You have different set of bacterial population in a newborn, depending on whether the milk provided is natural or formula. In the weaning period, solid foods when are taken उष्टावण झाल्यानंतर जेव्हा किंवा थोडंसं आधी त्या फर्मिक्यूट्सचा तिथे प्रादुर्भाव होतो, and this is a schematic representation and not to the scale. Then in the early childhood, traditional foods which we provide in the Indian context and maybe in the Western context also matter so much. And this is a particular reference is Tanaka et al. 2017. So this is the very recent attractive research avenue for all over the world where people are thinking and pondering about it. Now, diversity of bacterial species. I have brought a very sincere effort that we look beyond E. coli, we look beyond bacteria which are there in the syllabus and which reside within us. But it is not in the syllabus, and so you don't learn about them till your MSc Part 2 distinction. You do not know about maybe Veillonella, Rothia, Neisseria. Neisseria, you must be knowing gonorrhea, but the most important is Lactobacillus, and that we shall discuss later on. They are in the oral cavity, they say. Stomach, as already proved by the Nobel Prize winner, that Helicobacter pylori, causative agent of ulcer, is there as a commensal, but the titer matters. Small intestine, again the same, but Ruminococcus, I would bring down your factor to Ruminococcus, which is a butyrate producing genera. And butyrate is one of the most important chemical signals for mental and gut biota. So these are the, and in the large intestines, you have the other proteobacteria and other species or genera, which matter so much. These bacteria have effect on metabolism, immune system. We knew about it, not directly but indirectly through their metabolites and the chemical signals that they provide. I'll tell you, there are 500 neurons in the GI tract and brain has 100 neurons, and these two neurons speak to each other, just in the first cartoon that I have shown you. The immune system and the nervous system. This is not often taught to a microbiology or zoology or any anthropology student. Now the GutPhage database, dear students, this is the brand new avenue that comes. We have never thought that the phages have a habitat of human gut or animal gut or a lizard gut or anywhere else. So this is the advantage of being scientific. The research that has been carried out across the globe has enriched human life so much so that understanding it and living skillfully is a blessing of clear thinking. Scientific thinking may or may not be termed as clear thinking, but yes, it is a gateway to clear thinking. GI tract microflora consists of bacteriophages. Now, this is a discovery for those who have not learned in these phages as habitat is human gut. Phages regulate bacterial population inside. Now you can imagine a phage within your colonized autochthonous bacterial population in the GI gut, and as you know, these can transfer genes. So they can have a species variation in the gut itself, if this is a possibility. And one phage, as is perceived, has more than one species as its host. So obligate parasite, intracellular parasite within a gut is having a privilege for itself to colonize, and then there is a definite genetic transfer. Learned microbiologists will definitely say that. Now there is a database in UK. What I have brought you is a reference of February 2021. which says that there is a gut-phage database where viral genomes, this is gut-phage database, GDP stands for gut-phage database, and which is more than 1 lakh viral genomes, half of which are previously unknown. So even those who are well acclaimed in the viral genomes of bacteriophages have found out the mystery of these particular GPDs, and this is something which can give rise to many startups in the near future to make your gut healthy and wealthy. So this will aid discovery of new treatments, and these new treatments are the privileges that I have brought to you. And this is just a schematic diagram of the metagenomes of 28 countries spanning 66 continents, because habitats will vary, nutrition will vary, people will vary in their microbiome, that is understood. Everybody's phage microbiome is unique, they say. Now, this is a very important scientific happening in GI. So this is a new. So what is psychobiome? I have described a word psychobiome in the title. And it is a group of companies, a group of youngsters who are thinking about microbiome, which affects our psychology, our thinking, how we feel, how we act, how we behave, is psychobiome. So crosstalk between gut microbiota and brain may have a crucial impact during basic neurological processes and disorders. Now, these disorders are autism, which is a birth disorder, but then you can have Alzheimer, Parkinson, which is a degenerative disorder. So neurological disorders are the worst one can have. Some are simple and hidden, like OCD, obsessive compulsive behavior. So this is a disorder. People often neglect schizophrenia, very neglected, because very few people get into schizophrenia relatively, and they are not going to yield anything for the pharma companies. So this is one thing that one needs to understand. Alteration in the composition of gut microbiota affect thoughts and behavior. You have seen very weird news when you open the newspaper. You see very weird relationships getting into horrific stories. You see people committing suicide at the smallest disappointments. You see young people sacrificing their quality time in depression and nervous breakdowns and etc. They say that these are the alterations signaled by dysbiosis of gut flora. I'll come to dysbiosis, but symbiosis is a word which we love so much. If we create dysbiosis within us, we are here for alteration in the composition, and which will affect eventually our thoughts and behavior. Eat right. Psychobiome implies the microbiome of the gut affecting one's mental health, definitely. Now here I come to the most important slide, which everybody knows, but we in the rat race of life, we kind of neglect ourselves, and I am no exception. So I'm talking from the bottom of my heart. It's the young age where you have to have a very conscious effort to keep your microbiota right, and you should have a realization that everything in my body is definitely interconnected, interlinked, even to the level of my thoughts, and my thoughts dictate my behavior. Stress, there is brain, there is gut, and there is microbiota. What is dysbiosis? Inflammatory cytokines, neuromodulators, microbial metabolites, dietary fermentation. Now these can cause dysbiosis. It is a bidirectional talk. Bidirectional meaning the brain would talk to you, your gut, and your gut will send messages to your brain. And when there is dysbiosis, there is going to be a discomfort. Microbiota is going to talk to your brain through neuroendocrine immune mediators. These words might sound very, very systematically British, but then I can tell you, you just need to know that whatever we eat creates precursors to the hormones that are really important in our behavior and thought process. Gut is going to have an axis there, which says that HPA axis, which is hypothalamus pituitary adrenal. axis. Adrenal is a gland above your kidneys. Pituitary and hypothalamus are equilocated, so to say. And they have termed it as enteronervous system. ENS stands for enteronervous system. And the vagus nerve, out of the 12 nerves that you learn in 10th and 12th standard, somewhere around that, the most important nerve, that is vagus nerve, is connecting your GI tract with your brain. And this brain, after stress, is exhibiting loneliness, autism, cognitive deficit. Cognitive deficit is a deficit which is demential. You cannot recognize. Cognition is identifying, having a reference there. And behavioral disorders and psychological disorders, we see it more often than not these days, and blame it on your not so right microbiota. Now this is Chidambaram et al. 2020. The vagus nerve connects brain and gut, regulates breathing, swallowing, digestion of food, sends signals from brain to gut and vice versa. Metabolites secreted by microbes in the gut may infiltrate blood vessels and reach brain. Barring the blood-brain barrier, they may have some kind of offensive and defensive system there. Yeah. So microbes prompt neuropod cells in the gut lining to stimulate the vagus nerve. Now, what I'm discussing here are the mechanisms through which this particular HPA axis is functional in the body, and it is functional, and it has its own periodic rhythm, because the neuropods are the cells which are lined, which are the linings of vagus nerves. Microbes activate enteroendocrine cells in the gut lining, which send hormones throughout the body. And the regulation finally may be somewhere else, but then we are responsible as microbiota there. That is what they say. Microbes influence gut immune cells. There are immune cells in the gut. There are endocrinal cells in the gut. There are neuropods in the gut, and there is a pool of micro nano metabolites in the GI tract, which are finally responsible for the mental health of the person, as is evident from many animal studies. And human studies will be, and we can give various projects of this, provided someone funds it. Last mechanism through which this signaling is taken place is inflammation and immune cells and inflammation, which can affect the brain. Now, which are the metabolites we are discussing? Short chain fatty acids such as butyrate. I mentioned ruminococcus, and there is something called as lichenococcus also, which have been seen, and a large amount of research papers are available on butyrate producing bacteria in the human gut, and it's also tryptophan to certain extent. Psychobiosis for mental health, biotics for center. We have learned about prebiotics, which prompt the colonization or production of probiotics. Probiotics, which give you a ready-made dose of microbiota, right microbiota to eat. But this is called as psychobiotics, where you are carefully looking at which are those microbial genera or species which are not able to adhere due to some reasons, maybe overdose of antibiotics, as I didn't mention in one of those slides, where rampant use in Indian culture, we do not have a very careful selection of antibiotic administration in public health. Very bad point, because everywhere else in the world, you cannot go to the pharmacist and take antibiotics at your own risk. You are risking the entire microbiota. The wrong microbiota, we are creating abnormal conditions by taking antibiotics. What will happen is body will choose antibiotic resistant flora, and which is not going to give you the same mental health which is perceived at the time of our birth. So dysbiosis will get into the place, and opportunistic microbes can take advantage, proliferate, resulting in inflammation. And inflammation is the root cause of many, many known and unknown diseases of human body and mind. Microbiome-based novel therapies for dysbiosis correction. So we are trying to make ours. I will not touch wrong eating habits, wrong sitting habits, wrong addictions, or taking stress unnecessarily, or overthinking, or whatever will not have symbiosis of microbiota, or even the kind of kapha pitta balance that Ayurveda discusses. We'll not get into the details. We know symbiosis, we know dysbiosis. Do not cause dysbiosis. And what are the microbiome based novel therapies for dysbiosis correction? Assuming that during the course of modern life, during the course of rat race, so many examinations students have to get into. The most important mental health disorder is panic and anxiety, OCD and depression. It is not very serious from family point of view, but then consistent anxiety, consistent panic, consistent depression is something which takes out quality life out of you. People often wonder, everything is there, why the person is suffering? And this particular is due to dysbiosis, as they say, because so much research is available. Now they are saying, just as transplantation of bone marrow, just as transplantation of a vital organ, which is made feasible, why don't you do a very simple exercise of microbiota? And this is what is known as psychobiotics. With a conscious effort of transplanting the right kind of microbiota for a wrong kind of dysbiosis that the person is suffering from, is a matter of diagnosis and treatment. So that will be done through various means, and there are many startup companies around the world which are thinking on similar lines. Psychobiotics will be soon sold on the same shelf, but with proper diagnosis and detection, along with the prebiotic and probiotic era that we already have seen, and can be a correction through our normal food exercise also, because prebiotics are fibrous foods that we normally eat. Probiotics are live cultures that we have through buttermilk or curd. Buttermilk is the best thing. In my microbiology, one of my microbiology heads, Dr. Ranjan Garge, had told us की ताक म्हणजे पृथ्वीवरचं अमृत असतं. आणि ते किती खरंय हे 20-21 मध्ये अगदी सिद्ध होतंय, आणि 21-21 मध्ये ते जनरूढ झालेलं असेल. 5 based therapies, very interesting, and something which has prompted me to take this topic to you. Psychobiotics include probiotics, live bacteria which when ingested confer mental health benefits through interactions with commensal gut bacteria. भोजनांती ताक घ्यावे आणि ते सुद्धा थोडे घ्यावे असे आपल्या इथे सांगितलं असतं. भोजनाच्या आधी नाही आणि भोजनाच्या उपरांत नाही. जेव्हा शेवट आहे तेव्हा तुम्ही allow that particular there is another hypothesis there that the prebiotic that you're taking or probiotic you're taking should escape the stomach pH, because the bacteria would require, lactobacilli would require something safer to travel and colonize the intestines, which are again alkaline to certain extent. The environment in microaerophilic or anaerobic, so to say. Even Clostridium can be seen inside. So prebiotic is the food that enhance the growth of beneficial, not to mention. I'll come straight to a very different topic now. Having known this, those who are futuristic and those who want to become scientists by profession, everybody can become a science lover, but few become scientists. And these scientists, if you want to become a scientist, then how does one do this microbiome exercise? How does one know the psychobiotics, what to give and when to give? Now, I'll take you through a very favorite slide of mine. This is microbiology to metagenomics. So evolution of methods in microbiology. I'm sure we all learn history of microbiology with a lot of passion. But now we have to take this history as something which is done 20 years ago only. Because so much is being done in biology and life science, and with this corona pandemic, we have become so careful about our lives that it is very important to know what are the most modern techniques where culture independent diagnosis is done. And I'll take you through 1676 to 2011, the milestones which give us the idea of DNA sequences Even bacteriophage are DNA viruses. The corona one is RNA virus, which allows you cDNA and then having a genome exercise out of all the new species, old species. But from Leeuwenhoek to next gene sequencing to metagenomics. What is metagenomics? There is one more slide that I would like to explain to you. But what I will take you through is, in the 17th century, late 17th centuries, we saw that microbes are indeed some kind of entities which are around us without we being aware of it. They are invisible. Then Robert Koch said that no, life begets life. Then you have Vinogradsky microbial ecology experiments. The first time that they do not occur in pure culture, they have an ecology for themselves where all kind of love and hate relationships exist in a given niche area. Then Sanger, then in late 20th century, he developed DNA sequencing. So we now don't need to culture, we can go for sequencing, culture independent exercise. And then onwards till 2011, we have a Roche, we have Human Genome Microbiome Project publication. And in 2021, we see the gut bacteriophage viral genome database is published by UK. So the point is, when we learn history of microbiology, we don't have to rush to the 300-year-old all the time. It's good to know, but what is happening around you in the world, in continents, and which reflect on your independent exercise of GI tract is something which should attract you, dear students, and you must know it. It is not beyond your reach. So metagenomics is one of the tools which is going to enable you to understand the microbiome independent of your culture. You may have to take some excreta samples, but you can do without pure cultures, and there is no point in not knowing which is not culturable, because you end up into knowing which is culturable in all those excreta samples, be it blood, be it urine, be it stool, be it something else. All the time you see occult blood in the stool samples if they are green. So it's physicochemical exercise. But then if you want to see what is not culturable, then you will have to depend yourself on something called as metagenomics. Now, what is done here is extraction of high quality DNA, which is not very difficult vis-a-vis the specific and non-specific one. I'll not get into the details, but I always feel that students should be exposed to what is new, what is something which they might have to choose as a career. So where are we going to get the sequencer, when are we, but then teach something little less. It's not required. मी नेहमी जे उदाहरण देते ते उष्टावणाचं देते. त्या छोट्या मुलाला 9व्या महिन्यामध्ये उष्टावणामध्ये क्लिअरली असं दिलं जातं जे त्याला पुढे जाऊन खायचंय. तो काय ती अख्खी जिलबी खाणार नसतो, पण त्याला दाखवली जाते जिलबी. तो काही श्रीखंडाची वाटी खाणार नसतो, पण त्याच्या वाटीत थोडंसं श्रीखंड दिलं जातं, त्याला भात दिला जातो. So similarly, dear students, you are being exposed to these techniques. Do not get introduced to these techniques as something which your future holds for you. Clinical microbiome analysis are usually based on targeted shotgun metagenomic next genome sequencing, which is very common. Just as we culture, they have agencies and get this done. Genome sequence assembled into, there comes in silico exercise. In vitro is within petri dishes, in vivo is animal experiments, and in silico are bioinformatics elements. Genomes and these genomes libraries are exercises made
हॅलो मरळ मॅडम, दुर्गा
हा
मॅडम,
बोला सर.
तिकडे ते अनम्यूट
Yes,
झाले
sir.
पडते मॅडम सगळे.
हा मॅडम
हा
अनम्यूट झाले.
मॅडम,
त्या बाहेर पडल्या होत्या.
हा त्यांना घ्या मध्ये. हो
मॅम अनम्यूट फ्रॉम युअर साइड.
हा तुमच्या
And next-
साईडने अनम्यूट करा मॅडम.
Yeah, केलं. Am I audible?
येस मॅम येस.
My last slide actually was on. I'll go to that slide now. Am I seen on the screen? Madam? Yeah. The
येस मॅम.
conclusion
येस मॅम.
Conclusion is microbiome gut-brain axis influences how we think, feel and behave. Very important. आपण बऱ्याच वेळा काही संस्कार, काही अपब्रिंगिंग आणि काही बाकी सगळ्या गोष्टींवर बऱ्याचशा बिहेवियरल पॅटर्न्सचा दोषारोप देत असतो. पण we have to think scientifically also sometimes why the behavior from a certain person is fluctuating and becoming so unpredictable that we cannot really sustain it. Crosstalk between microbes and brain affects basic neurogenerative processes and neurodegenerative disorders. These might be heavy words for students who do not perhaps have a flair for knowing their own human actions and bodies, but neurodegenerative are with the age, and neuro comes for brain, and neurogenerative म्हणजे cognitive आणि बाकी सगळ्या disease efficiencies. Modern culture independent techniques can be used for microbiome analysis, be it gut or be it somewhere else on the skin. Novel therapies targeting microbiome correction may prove effective for neurological disorders like autism, Alzheimer. I could have taken some case studies where people have really shown some kind of reversal in some cases, Parkinson disease, depression, schizophrenia, among others. So that brings me to the last slide. It is not, yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Stop the screen sharing, ma'am.
Yeah, these are the reference. Yeah, no. These are the references that I have used. And yes, I wanted to show you this slide, which was not coming. And this opens, ask the right questions, and the nature will open the door to her secret, says the most celebrated scientist, C.V. Raman sir, whose birthday is being celebrated. So with due respect, with highest respect to Professor C.V. Raman, ask the right questions and the nature will open the door to her secrets. This is what the entire essence of this particular talk was. And thank you so much for the opportunity. I would like to thank the president of the trust, Dr. Kursari, and I'm sure whatever small mistakes I might have done, I was conscious of being in front of a surgeon, so he can excuse me for that. And thank you all, dear students, and my seniors, Dr. R.D. Joshi, the principal of your college, Dr. Venkat Hamde, my senior again. These are most respected microbiologists around, and Professor R.V. Kulkarni for being here. I hope we can have a question and answers. Otherwise, goodbye from me. Thank you.